Hi, I'm Abraham. Everybody I know calls me Avi. And I decided that I'll try my hands at an English video on YouTube. So here I am. If you are interested in news concerning Israel, you must have been bombarded by disturbing news coming out of this country since the beginning of the year, or let's say the Georgian calendar year. You probably heard of the end of democracy in Israel. Yes, no more democracy. You probably heard of its economic demise. You probably heard of its military demise. You probably heard of its health system collapsing. Basically, haters probably rejoice, supporters probably feel the end of the world. Fret not, none of the above is true. Israel is still more democratic than 99.9% of countries on this earth, even if the judicial system is totally corrupt. You want proof? None of the protesters has been sent to the gulag, and none of the subversives that enticed the undemocratic uprising has been even charged. Talking about democracy as a concept, what is it? The running of a country by the people, encapsulated by the notion of the people voting representatives to make laws and administer the state. Usually, it also means that in a democracy, the majority has a say in the above. However, when the left in Israel loses, they term this natural democratic process the tyranny of the majority. When the left wins, it's democracy. Well, not really. What the left is trying to force is a tyranny of the minority. In a system that is taking place all over the world, the left pretending to be superior either intellectually, morally, culturally, and on and on and on, over everybody that disagrees with them. Not only patronize everybody else, but try to force their opinion on everybody, using violence, either verbal or physical. So, what has that to do with the current events in Israel? The so-called protesters pretend to object to what has been called judicial reform. In truth, it has nothing to do with said reform. They just cannot accept losing the elections of November 1st, 2022. They call it a regimental putsch. Really? Since when has a judicial system become the regime? Because that is what they infer. Why do I say this? Let's discuss the so-called reform. Israel's democratic state is loosely based on the British model with three major differences. There's no royal in Israel, no House of Lords, no regional elections. Instead, there is a president voted in by the Knesset to be a neutral head of state, and proportional elections of the entire country. Originally, the Knesset had supremacy over the courts, like the British Parliament has in Britain. However, in 1992, two laws were voted in: human dignity and liberty. The other is not too relevant to this discussion. While it is a worthy law all in itself, it was deceivably constructed to revert the lawmakers' authority of making laws. One Supreme Court judge decided to overturn the state's entire system of government. How? He allowed himself the privilege of freely cancelling laws of the Knesset. And one of his rulings that turned into an unlawful precedent was that the Attorney General decision turns into a gospel. The problem with this stupidity is twofold. One, the Attorney General is a judiciary counsel advising on the law, not forcing his opinion. Since if things go sideways, he or she is not responsible, and since he or she is not elected, he or she do not pay the price for their mistakes. The other problem is, being an attorney for the government, and if his or her decision is final, it becomes totally crazy. Imagine you as a person hire an attorney to defend you in court, and for some reason he or she acts against your interests, and you cannot fire him or her and replace him or her. If this sounds right to you, I'm lost for words. The last controversy hinges on a basic law curbing the court's usage of reasonableness. What is reasonableness, you ask? Well, it is found in the British judicial system. However, British judges use restraint and use this doctrine only for extreme circumstances. In Israel, judges just go off their rockers, applying their political views on what they decide is reasonable. The opposition has gone crazy with their reactions. The economy will collapse. Some has-beens in the military, especially 50-year-olds spare parts pilot, pretended to refuse service. Doctors have gone on strike, threatening to emigrate from Israel. And the biggest of all, a Supreme Court has decided to sit in judgments on a petition to cancel the law. For one, they have no legal jurisdiction to do so. Secondly, they are in conflict with the law. So how do they even dare to consider sitting in judgment? If this does not convince you that the Israeli judicial system is corrupt, then nothing will, unless you personally visit Israel and fall in their clutches. As for the economy, facts and figures indicate that Israel is probably better off economically than most Western powers like EU economic powers and apparently even the US economy. Israel has a reserve to debt positive ratio. The energy industry is just getting started. The armaments industry is thriving. The high-tech industry is not really dependent only on the protesters. And hopefully soon enough, Israeli government will dispose of suffocating monopolies that plague the country. As I mentioned before, you do not want to fall in the clutches of the Israeli judiciary system. Why? Well, the doctrine of the fruit of poison tree, practiced in most democracies, is a big no-no in Israel. There's no limits to the violations and transgressions of the police and the prosecution will commit in order to get a conviction. And the courts, oh, they don't give a shit. For the courts to accept evidence that was obtained by criminal violations of the law is totally legitimate. So much for protecting the people. Don't take it as if it is a good thing because criminals are punished. Oh no, the courts go very soft on criminals that murder, rape, and rob and extort. However, they do condone detentions of old ladies in order to put pressure on witnesses. They may rule based on a witness testimony if the judge seems to believe the witness. Hard real evidence not required. It reminds me of an ancient joke here that goes like this. Someone claims your sister is a whore. Now go prove you have no sister. Haha, the court may convict you of being her pimp. Which brings me to the hooligans that demonstrate for democracy and for turning the courts into a dictatorship. For them, defendants has to prove his or her innocence, not the other way around. That the prosecution has to prove the defendant's guilt. Some democracy the left is striving for. The deep state in Israel is working overtime to oppress the common people. Mark my words, the world is marching towards World War III, and it will not be between Russia and the West or China and the US, but the civilian war that will divide countries between the progressive left and the rest of the people. Well, all I can say is Shana Tova and a Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you.